Okay,
right.
hello. Howdy everyone. Welcome to the official LaunchBox Twitch channel. How are we all doing today? Hope everyone is doing well.
It's both of us.
That's right. We've got double the people today, and since it is Halloween soon, you will have to indulge us in our little backgrounds here. But I hope everyone's well. Let us know where you're joining from. What are you all playing these days? And pop into the chat and say hi.
How are you doing today?
Okay. I'm very well, thank you.
That's good. And hello, everybody, in the chat. Hope you are all doing well. It is Halloween, almost Halloween, which is why I've got these random goggles on my head. Yeah, which is the only thing that I found in my entire house that was sort of Halloween-esque.
Does anyone have any Halloween plans? Does anyone have any Halloween plans going on? Let us know what you typically like to do around this time of year. Any specific games you like to play, or just fun traditions? Did a Pixel says been playing 90s rhythm games. Yeah, that is always a good shout. Exactly. Plan is play games. But which ones? That is the question. So for those who don't know, there are two of us here today. My name is AstrBob. You may see me in the Discord and making various announcements. And we have Faeran, aka Brian, with us here today. You want to introduce yourself, Brian?
Sure, I'm right here. Yeah, for those that didn't come to my streams, I am the product manager here at LaunchBox, and I do all things LaunchBox. You might use a theme that I might have created, whether it be LaunchBox or Big Box, and I guess, direct the fun here at LaunchBox, in the hopes that it trickles down to everybody. I guess that's me in a nutshell. I wouldn't mind hearing what... I keep forgetting that you're over here. I wouldn't mind hearing what you kind of do over there where you are for Halloween.
Yeah. Me personally, not too much. No sort of big tradition or anything. I live sort of stuck all the way on the 5th floor of an apartment with no elevator in the building. So it's very unlikely that any trick-or-treaters will even find us or sort of manage to make their way to our front door. Definitely if you go out into the city, there's big parties going on, but nothing too much around the neighborhood. In our household, I would say we're certainly Halloween fans. You can probably tell by my lovely light in the background, which makes its way out of the cupboard once a year. If I was to take you into the other room, you would see a lot of AliExpress Halloween decorations that make an appearance. But yeah, sort of celebrate within the household, but nothing too crazy apart from that. But it's good to see some regular folks in the chat here. Focusborg, nice, thanks for joining. Good to see you. And it says, thanks to you guys, I've been organizing a lot of emulators and old games. 46k titles, well done. Wow. So exactly, always something new to be playing.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been playing the game of LaunchBox.
Exactly.
But also, hey, the old Alone in the Dark. I have some good memories of that game too. Have you ever played the old Alone in the Dark back on the DOS, or I don't know if it ever came out on Windows?
Not me personally. Heard very good things. I always get confused between Alone in the Dark and Eternal Darkness for the GameCube.
Oh, really?
One I did play, but yes. So just to give folks an overview of what's going to happen today, there's two of us here, and this is a little bit different to the traditional kind of LaunchBox tutorial style streams. Since it's Halloween, and we're sort of taking a more casual approach today. We do have, as you can see, Faeran's lovely LaunchBox instance up on screen, but a lot of today is kind of going to be a bit more chill. We are going to be having a chat. We're going to be going through some sort of topics and discussions. We'd love for you guys to sort of get involved in the chat, and feel free to steer the direction of this stream in whatever direction you see fit. We are going to talk about some LaunchBox topics. We'd love to get your insights and input on that. And of course, with it being Halloween, we do have some sort of Halloween-themed discussions. But that's kind of how it's going to run. So fairly casual. If that sounds good to you, grab a drink, grab a snack, get yourself comfy, and we'll probably be running for maybe an hour, maybe a little bit more than that today. We'll see how it goes. So, but yeah, thank you for joining us. We've got a nice little crowd here today. And of course, as usual with these streams, we are going to be giving away a LaunchBox license later on in the stream. So for anyone who doesn't have a Windows or an Android license, this could be your lucky day. Something to help you organize all of those lovely spooky Halloween games. I wonder what we could do, Brian. Maybe if you want to pop open Big Box, since it's Halloween, we could have a look at our lovely spooky playlist for anyone who hasn't stumbled across that yet, while we wait for folks to join in.
Actually completely forgot that it was my screen that everybody was seeing. So if anybody was in my last stream, you'd know that my hard drive died and I was rebuilding my own LaunchBox build, or at least one of my primary LaunchBox build. And so I was been working on that here and there as I can. And so I do have a few more games than I did during that last stream. Nothing crazy, but here we are in Big Box. All right.
If you also come across what the LaunchBox team is playing, that is another discovery playlist that's up at the moment, which we update fairly frequently. I personally am playing through Sonic X Shadow Generations right now, which just came out last week. As I'm sure a lot of you know, big Sonic fan here, and absolutely loving that remaster / additional game. Anyone who has played that in the chat, please let me know, because it is absolutely fantastic. Are you much of a Sonic guy, Brian? I don't think I've ever asked you that.
So back in the day, there was that the Sega Genesis marketing campaigns. I don't know if anybody remembers all those commercials, right? It made, like, I was a Nintendo guy. I had a Nintendo, I had a Super Nintendo, and then I just kind of remember watching those commercials, right? And it made, like, as a kid, it made the Nintendo feel like it completely worked to make Nintendo feel like the old, outdated system, and the Genesis was the cool kid system. And then some of my friends started having it, and I really badly wanted it. And eventually, I'm pretty sure I don't remember how we got it. Pretty sure it had something to do with myself, my brother went and got a Sega Genesis. And my brother's actually there in the chat, Griffith there. I have bad luck with hard drives. Yes, I do. So we got it specifically for Sonic 2. That was one of the games. I also got Aladdin because we were kids, and that ended up being an amazing game. And
good shout.
And played the heck out of Sonic 2. Like that was my first experience with Sonic. And became a fan.
Yeah.
Became a fan.
I think everyone played Sonic 2 at a friend's house for the first time. That was where I got my introduction. And we did we got to I think it's Sky Chase Zone, and then had to go to bed. And you did the thing where you just pause the Mega Drive and you leave it on overnight.
Yeah.
Come back to it in the morning. It's sort of way warmer than it should be, but managed to finally beat that.
We did the same thing with Super Mario Brothers 3. At least more than once.
Yeah.
More than once to just kept it on. Maybe even for days or like a week. Just had it on because, of course, that game has no ability to save. So that's what we did. We just never turned off the Nintendo. And I feel like we did, doing that allowed us to beat that game. It's just memories.
Yeah, Focusborg has a very good one from the Genesis era, was Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. Absolutely love that game. I was actually sorting out that game in my library recently.
Oh yeah.
Because there's a Master System version as well, and I decided, well, the Genesis version is it's quite funny playing those back to back and just hearing how much better it sounds on the Genesis. But yeah, that's a fantastic game. So what are you playing, Brian? We talked about me. What are you playing these days? If you're having any time to play anything?
So I have, and the game that not a lot of time, I must say, but there is a game. So I made it just to the what the LaunchBox team is playing playlist, and the reason why it took me forever to get to that list is because it sort of randomly appears in the list of dynamically created lists on this game discovery center. So you just keep hitting down and you'll eventually get there. The list is oh, that is an interesting pop-up ad that I just got. I should really close that out. And the list is randomly generated. So every time, not randomly generated, but randomly sorted. So every time that you come back to this page, you might see more games that we are playing. The games that I'm currently playing from this list, there's a number of them from me, but it's this game right here. It is the remastered version of the original adventure game called The Broken Sword, Shadow of the Templars. If you haven't played that game before, and you are an adventure game fan, this is like one of the top adventure games of its time. And yeah, if you missed this one for whatever reason, still does stand up. You have to be an adventure game fan, obviously, to enjoy it. But I definitely am, and I've been kind of going through this game as best as I can, and got to... I must be 2/3 of the way done at this point, and I have been enjoying it, and just like... I guess I played it a number of times over the years. I played all of the Broken Sword games, the whole series. I think they have 5 of them that are out, but they re-released them. They eventually they at one point re-released them on like iPads and like
I think
tablets.
that's the one I played.
And
I remember I had a version of Broken Sword on, I think, my first.
Yeah, it was
iPad.
the director's version, and not quite the same as the original experience. They kind of changed it up enough that you instantly see it. Like the game doesn't even start in the same way, so it kind of rubbed some people the wrong way just because of the amount of changes that it had. I enjoyed it when I played it on the iPad, and I got through it again. I played this game a number of times, so I'm enjoying it. And that's sort of the most recent thing that I've been doing.
Very nice. Very cool. Well, as you guys can see, so as I'm sure you know, we have dynamic sort of playlists within the Game Discovery Center now. We update these monthly, not just with sort of nice seasonal recommendations. So of course it's Halloween. And Brian, maybe if you want to pop to the Halloween playlist, if you can see, curious to see which spooky games are from your collection, because certainly in mine it doesn't show up too many. I can't say I have too many sort of scary spooky games, as we'll discover. But what we do is we try and sort of create these playlists monthly, and for today what we're going to do is obviously it's nearly the end of the month. If anyone does have any fantastic Halloween recommendations, please let us know in the chat. We'll get those added to the playlist live, and maybe tomorrow on the 31st, if anyone is stuck for something to play, you can jump in there. But what we're also going to do is we also love to source what next month's playlist is going to be. We have a theme, and that theme is called Harvest Time. A little bit late in the year. I know this is usually around sort of September, October. But the theme for next month's playlist will be Harvest Time, and that is games with themes of farming, harvesting, autumn. It's getting a bit cold outside now, and this could include games like Harvest Moon, Stardew Valley, Rune Factory, Disney Dreamlight Valley, and things like that. So I've just popped a little message in the chat, and as we go through the stream, please let us know if anyone's got any suggestions. I see RetroPython. I'm pretty sure that one is already in the Halloween playlist. That's definitely a good shout there for Phantasmagoria for the Halloween list. And as Focusborg says, yes, obviously having a large collection, the joy of sort of spontaneously searching for something and finding a game that you didn't realize existed is always fun. So please let us know these recommendations. And as we go through, we can actually get these lists updated, and you'll have a nice new one to enjoy for next month. But
I made it to the spooky games for October list, and so
fantastic.
The first
What's in
5 games on my list: Grim Fandango, the remastered version, great game if you haven't played it. Beetlejuice looks like for the NES. I have played this game. Don't really recommend it. Casper for the Super Nintendo. I've also played this game. I kind of remember liking it, but I was also like really young. And of course, the Addams Family for the Genesis, and A Night on Elm Street for the NES. So you can, I mean, it keeps going. Pumpkin Jack, another Addams Family game. Costume Quest. Yeah, some good games. Ghostbusters for the Sega Genesis.
Yeah, Ghostbusters. That's one in my collection.
Yeah, some great games here.
Alien Isolation, yeah. Scooby-Doo, is that which one was it? There was a good Scooby-Doo game for the GameCube.
This one is the Super Nintendo Entertainment System one.
Nice.
I don't think I've ever played this one, so I mean that's interesting. Let's take a look.
Yeah. Mr. Nibble's going to be playing Until Dawn on Halloween. And Squarebomb says, I'm getting a Retroid. That's really cool, actually. Which Retroid are you planning to get? Because I am also eagerly waiting for the Retroid Pocket 5, which I would love to get LaunchBox for Android up and running on. But I know they've got some good devices out there. I still have
this one here on my desk, which is the Retroid. I mean, it's an old one. I think it's the Retroid Pocket 2S. I'm going to guess. I can't actually read it in the dark here. But that's what I have. And overall, for the price, I would have definitely recommended it at the time. I don't have any Retroid Pockets after that. So I assume that you'd want to get the most recent one and that they've learned from the experience of making this one at the time when I purchased this. But overall, I didn't really have any problems with this device. Nice. It did what it was advertised. Played Final Fantasy IX. I believe
the Retroid Pocket Mini is a sort of updated version of that one. It's sort of the same form factor. It's been out for a couple of weeks now. Been hearing good things. But yeah, Squarebomb says Retroid Pocket 5. That's very cool. And they have some very nice colors as well. They've got a nice GameCube-inspired one. But yes, of course. And then, of course, the Odin 2 Portal just got announced, which sort of throws a spanner in the works, because I know that one's a lot more expensive, but it's 120 hertz. I think it's an OLED screen as well, which is really nice. Never a bad thing to have too much choice, but yeah, let us know as we go through. We're always curious to hear sort of what people like to play on. Of course, we're not all just playing on desktop PCs now. There's so many different handhelds out there. I myself, I play on a Lenovo Legion Go, which is my sort of primary driver. I would love to get a desktop eventually, but yeah, always curious to hear what other people's setups are like.
Nice.
And Focus Ball says Mansion of Hidden Souls for the Sega CD and Saturn. That's cool. I haven't heard that one. But if it's on the Sega Saturn, it's probably definitely going to be an FMV style game. I know there were lots of those. Okay, well, for those who may have joined a bit late, just to kind of let you know what's happening. So my name is AstrBob. We've got Faeran, the product manager here of LaunchBox, and today's stream is going to be a little bit more casual, more of a sort of discussion style. We're not going to be showing off too much, but of course we can deviate. It's very sort of ad hoc here. We do have some discussions specifically around sort of LaunchBox topics that we'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on. And then we'll do some Q&A, and we've also got a license to give away at the near the end of the stream. So thanks for joining us. Stick around. I think before we jump into the LaunchBox discussions, we're just going to, in the spirit of Halloween, we are going to kick things off with a little bit of a sort of Halloween question. And that is, of course, we've been looking at our Spooky Games for October Discovery playlist. But I'm just curious, I'm going to ask you, Faeran. So obviously Halloween and spooky games. What is your sort of history with horror games and spooky games? Do you play them much? Do you have much experience with them? And what would you say is your sort of top 3 if you had to choose? What would be your top 3 sort of spooky games of all time?
Well, I would start with the first experience that I think I've ever had. So this will be kind of nostalgic, and I basically had a friend that owned, like on the street that I grew up. We might have been, I don't know, 7 or 8, and he owned a Commodore 64, which was a big deal where I live. Commodore 64s were not huge as far as like the adoption rate in Canada. People had them. It was big. Let's not kid ourselves, but it was very expensive. I did not have one, and I would go to his house all the time, and he had piles of games, and that's all we would do. Just like every time I went there, we would just play the Commodore 64, and the one game that I remember from that is playing Ghostbusters. We were huge Ghostbusters fans, so we had to load it in when we found the disc or whatever it was, and that's probably the first ever memory I have playing some form of Halloween-esque type of game.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, it was the game that like you could, like you're one of the Ghostbusters and you're catching ghosts on the street. It's been a very long time. Your thing would shoot upwards and you would try to like capture the ghosts. It might have also been the one with where you're in the car and you're driving around the city. I'm sure people that I feel like it was a port, like it was on different systems or something. I mean, we didn't know that at the time, but that was my first experience. And as a kid, whether the game was good or not, you enjoy them all just because it was Ghostbusters. Yeah. So I kind of remember it fondly. I kind of remember it like very, very fun. That's all I remember. Just that it was like really fun to just play. But since then, I haven't, like, I don't gravitate towards the spooky games these days, but I do, like, there's like those odd games still, right? Like, of course, Ghostbusters, like I mentioned. It's just like weird series or games here and there that I remember playing. Alone in the Dark is something I remember playing a lot when I was a kid. A lot of those kinds of things. I also, there was a long time where I would play MMOs, like a lot, and those always had some sort of Halloween thing inside of them, or Halloween section, or like a spooky section. And so for a long time I would play games like EverQuest and of course World of Warcraft and stuff like that. And I had a good amount of time playing those, well, you know, in my, I'm gonna say, teens and 20s. So I guess that would be my answer. How about you? How about you and spooky games and your history around them?
Yeah, so I think like you, I can't pretend I'm a huge sort of aficionado of sort of horror games, spooky games. I have an absolute end. I will give infinite props to anyone who's played this or recognizes this, because this was my childhood game, and it was on Windows 95, and I think it was just one of those games that your parents sort of saw and picked up in the shop, and it was a point-and-click adventure called Dracula's Secret, and it was a little game where you sort of make your way up to Dracula's castle, and then you sort of investigate, and not a very long game, and arguably questionable in quality, but I just played the heck out of that game. And I remember it was, as a kid, it was absolutely terrifying. There's this one scene where when you're in the castle, and if you go into one of the wrong rooms, there's basically just a pair of eyes. It's these sort of red and yellow eyes, and then there's this music, and he basically says, like, get out, you shouldn't be in here, and he sort of kicks you out of the castle. But yeah, if anyone has played that, please let me know. And if you haven't, it is fantastic. I have that set up in my LaunchBox instance, and I absolutely love that game. And I think Focusborg has it. Yes. Yeah, it's Windows 3.1. That's right. Yes. Oh, that game was so good. And yeah, it's like you said. We all have this, and I'd love to hear what you guys think. There are those games which, when you look back at them now, they're sort of questionable. But man, you just played the heck out of those. It doesn't matter how bad they were or how sort of, But as a kid, you just replayed the heck out of those games. That was definitely one of mine. That's as far as I went, and it's very sort of cartoony in style. It's not scary by any means. It's that sort of Disney animation era style of sort of skeletons dancing around, yeah, it's really fun.
I just looked it up. I haven't seen this game before, but if I had it when I was a kid, I would have played this game to death. This would have been my kind of game. Especially as a kid, this actually looks really cool. Yeah, kind of sad that I missed out on this one when I was a kid. But yeah. I mean, that's what you did, right? You would play games because games were like finite. There wasn't that many that you had when you were a kid. I kind of wonder what it would be like growing up now with all of the choice that you have. What would I have ended up doing? And I don't know. Like I can't even picture that myself. But yeah, all we have is our history. Just going through some of the chat there. Pishbot, you had Splatterhouse on PC Engines up there. Yeah, that's a good one. Dracula for the Mattel in television, mainly for the ridiculous box art. Isn't that true? The box art of games of those eras are just crazy. I don't think I've ever seen that one, though. I'll have to remember to look that one up. The Castles of Dr. Creep. That sounds kind of crazy.
Yeah, and of course, let's not forget there's obviously a bunch of modern ones as well. So Limbo as well, I know is highly regarded. I do want to play the Dead Space remake from last year. I think that got a lot of good praise. Personally, I'm a big Resident Evil fan as well, although I know that leans itself more into the action in some games. And of course, I think apart from, I think probably one of the all-time classics has to be Luigi's Mansion, the original one. Just playing that for the first time was, sort of replay that almost yearly. It's probably one of the only games that my wife actually will enjoy playing is Luigi's Mansion.
That's really cool. What's funny is that I bought a GameCube, and at this point in my life, I was old enough to I don't even know. I think I was at the end of high school or something like that, and decided to buy a GameCube strictly for the Zelda game. And what's weird is that I never got Luigi's Mansion at that time, and it would have been the game that I would have loved to play, but for some reason never got it, and only played it much later on in life, when eventually I did go and rediscovered the GameCube and played all the games that I missed, which I think is what a lot of people did, considering how poorly that system did.
Yeah, it's funny because I only found out, obviously, as a kid, you never knew how the sales numbers were doing, and I was definitely a GameCube kid. I just had no idea how sort of underwhelming it was, apparently, to the rest of the industry, because to me, that was just the most amazing console ever. And then you find out later, oh, it didn't do well, but I had such a good time with this. So yeah, it doesn't, of course, we're all sort of very clued into this now, but when you're just enjoying it, having fun, then it doesn't really matter. We've got Mr. Nibble says The Quarry is a good modern game, and of course Alan Wake 2, I know, had a lot of good praise around that. A Doom mod called My House, always up for experiencing some Doom mods. That sounds interesting. So yeah, let us know as we go through, and don't forget, of course, we've got the next month's seasonal discovery playlist, which is harvest time. Anyone who's in the mood for some sort of farming game, some cozy sort of collectathons, or perhaps let us know, and we'll get that updated in our next month's discovery playlist. So for everyone who's here, thanks for joining. we're having a sort of informal, casual discussion here with myself, AstrBob, and Faeran, the product manager for LaunchBox. And I think we're going to dive into some specific LaunchBox questions now, because of course that's why you're all here. That's why we all sort of love building these collections, is LaunchBox. So Faeran, do you want to pop open the community thread for the ROM organization? This is a topic that we're going to start with.
Yeah.
And as you pull that up,
let me start this this import that I have going for my Nintendo 64 games. Might as well get that going and have stuff be imported in the background. In the meantime, let me get that up for us.
That's all right. So we put out a sort of a question on our forum, and we try and do these sort of weekly or every other week sort of a discussion point for LaunchBox, because we're generally interested in how people are sort of managing their collections. Obviously, everyone's workflow is different, and there is certainly no right or wrong way, but we are generally curious on how people like to manage certain aspects of LaunchBox, because of course we want to make sure that we are improving the functionality of the application and making it in a way that caters to your workflows. So we asked this question, and we got some very interesting results, and we're just going to kind of have a sort of quick chat about this. So the thread, if anyone hasn't seen it, you can access it from the community corner section of our forum, which is where we post these type of questions. I'll pop a link in the chat in a second here. But yeah, you can join in. There's a sort of little poll, and we'd love to hear some sort of comments. But it's really around how you choose to manage your collection, because of course we all have games from our past, but there's something satisfying about sort of collecting and filling out your build with maybe your favorite series, or some people love to go for all the games. I think a lot of us here probably do love to sort of fill that out, whether it's your favorite platforms or sort of just having that sort of historical timestamp of things from your favorite platforms. So what's the first question on there, Faeran? I need to get it up on my screen properly, but we're just going to kind of quickly talk through, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And of course, the chat, please feel free to chime in as well. But what's the first question that we've got there?
Yeah, so the first question here, do you sort your games for single platform into folders based on the region?
Yeah, so of course, especially for less of an issue for modern games, but of course previous games, depending on where you lived, and the three main regions probably would be EU, US, and Japan. And we know that some people love to collect all of the regions. I personally am more in the camp of a sort of, I'll just stick with one. I think these days I tend to stick with the US ones, mainly because I do a lot of retro achievements, which usually require the US one. It depends on, sometimes they go for the EU one to support more languages. But of course, with older games, US versions generally ran at 60 hertz, I believe, rather than 50. Most of my games growing up were PAL games at 50 hertz. Of course, you never knew and you never really cared as a kid. But of course now, if I can, I try to source the US version. I don't really see a need to have both of them. But I think the outlier there would be Japanese games, of course, not only because they are sometimes exclusive to that region, but sometimes there can be different variations. I sort of spoke in previous streams that my favorite example of collecting all of the regions is Donkey Konga, because that game has a different track list for the different regions. But yeah, generally I'm sticking with one region. It's usually informed by what's on retro achievements, or the one that I have owned in the past. But how about you?
Well, I mean, we've got some answers here. Fishbot, you collect both US and Japan games, and specifically separate them. Is it because Japan has lovely box art and you want to see it? And Focusborg, you just take everything. You just like, give me everything, and then you dump everything, you import it all, and then you just get our system to combine them all. I'm assuming with a specific regional variant that you want as the primary, and then you just right click and choose the version that you want to play at any given time. For me, I feel like this question's a multi-tiered question. And it's not so much like, I guess the first part of that question is, hey, do you even collect more than one region of games? I guess that's question number one. And what are those regions? And I think it depends for me, right? So it depends on like how different the library would have been between them. Sometimes the systems were like completely different. Like you've got the TurboGrafx 16 right here in North America, but in Japan you had the, what was it called, PC Engine. And even though they were very similar, their libraries were completely different. Like they're not even representative of each other's like libraries. Yeah. There's no like a variant of that game. There's just completely different games. And you got stuff like that throughout the library. So if it's like different enough, I will take those systems and import them as separate platforms, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then, but normally I don't really want to see many different. I will curate it to a particular region, and normally, to appease my nostalgia. If that, I think a lot of people want to do something like that. Like they start with what they know, and you venture out amongst that as best you can. But that's sort of like your starting point. That's sort of my answer of that question.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, how you actually organize this, with LaunchBox, we try to make that a non-issue, because of course you can use LaunchBox's default games/platforms directory and just drop all of your ROMs in there. We do also give you the option to have your ROMs in a directory that's outside of LaunchBox, and that's if you want to sort of maintain some of that organization. Me personally, I'm happy to just drop stuff in the default games directory. I don't have a huge collection by any means. It certainly is huge to me. My collection is probably around 2,500 now. But I know that's puny numbers in comparison to a lot of people out there. Definitely let us know what I saw some numbers earlier, but it's always fun to compare the number of games that we have. But for me, it works. I just drop it into those folders. But of course, some folks like to sort of maintain those that original ROM structure, which brings us on to the next question, which is, and I think this is a very specific use case here, but we have heard it. We have heard that people like to maintain their ROMs in alphabetical directories, and you would have to have a large library for this to be a thing. For me personally, it's not. But curious to hear if anyone else abides by that structure.
I think for the most part, you can see here that mostly everyone on their forums is saying no, because it is a strange, semi-new way of organizing your game collection, mostly for people that are using something like the Mister or something like that, and only because the Mister has literally no way of showing like a good UI at all. I think all you see is a file, like basically a file, like a really crude file explorer type of thing. You just like see them and they're like, well, how can I make this easier on myself to pick a game? Let's put everything in alphabetical order, like such and such. And then somebody probably created some sort of article, and then other people like, yeah, I'll do that. So you could see, not like, if you're just talking about LaunchBox, and this even goes back to the first question about regional folders, it should not matter what your folder system looks like if you're using something like LaunchBox, because LaunchBox is your file explorer. LaunchBox is the way that you interact with your games. Who cares what the games looks like in the actual like files? What do the files look like? Make sure that your folders are clean, right? You have the games in there that you want to have and nothing else. But outside of that, a flat structure where it's just like, this is your platform, here's all of the games in the platform, dump it in there. And LaunchBox takes care of the rest in almost every instance. So That's what I would definitely adhere to, and based off of the forums, most other people adhere to something like that too.
That's right.
Wouldn't mind hearing what everybody does as well here.
And of course, this is what we've attempted to do with the save management as well, because the idea that we're going for with LaunchBox here is, although we talk about the underlying file system, of course, it shouldn't really matter because LaunchBox is on top of that. That's managing things for you. Saves is one of those historically, RetroArch, and it still does. It just literally dumps everything into one big folder. You can separate it by content directory. But of course, with our new save management features, the idea is that you shouldn't need to worry about that. You can manage those from within LaunchBox directly. So, but yeah, it certainly is a thing, managing directories. And Fishbot has a great question here, which is, I'm trying to reduce my collection. Not a question, but
you get overwhelmed with too much choice.
Yeah. Do you have any tips, Faeran,
So
ways to sort of clean up the collection, like any sort of playlists or anything that could help with, selecting games that might not be as relevant and can be cleaned out?
There's essentially like the curation method, right? The manual method. That's normally for people that remember that system, grew up with that system, have history with specific games that they absolutely need to see in their library. There's a lot of platforms like that for me. But for the most part, if you're just like, well, I've never played this like platform ever. I never had, let's say you never had the Sega Saturn, for example. You never played it. You don't have any friends with it. You have no history with it. One thing that you can definitely do, you can do this in a number of ways, to be honest. But let's go with one of the ways. You can just, I'm in the platform section, but if I go to the platform category section, go to Sega Saturn, I would probably create a playlist. Just be like a best games for Sega Saturn, something like that. And then here I would just set, it automatically sets the platforms equal to Sega Saturn because I right-clicked on Sega Saturn and then created the playlist. So it already knew I wanted to be platform specific. And then I would probably go to star rating and just do something that's greater than, I don't know, 3.9, maybe 4, if you want to go that way. And you can go to the games tab and you can kind of see what's greater than 3.9. And let's say I'm good with that. And it's going to appear inside of my Sega Saturn platforms. And at that point, you essentially narrowed it down to 56 games instead of 244. And it's what the community has deemed the best 56 games on the Sega Saturn. So you could be relatively good if you did something like this, either on a per platform basis or through your whole library. Say I just want a library where it's just 4.0 or above, and you just kind of clear your library and see what that looks like. And that can help you sort out, like a ahead of time sorting. I'm the type of person that doesn't want to do a heck of a lot of sorting ahead of time like this. I don't want to go to Sega Saturn and then have to choose from like 15 different options before I can see games. I want to click on Sega Saturn. I want to see all the games. And at that point, you might be overwhelmed. But then you would narrow it down from there using all of the LaunchBox capabilities, either through the filter button. Maybe you have a specific genre that you feel like playing today, controller support, a specific amount of players, or you want to go to arrange by, and maybe I just wanted to temporarily look at star rating. So here's all the 4+ games in star rating. I didn't need to create a playlist. I'm just listing them out, and maybe you just want to pick a random game with the select random game button, or the random game option here on the platform details page. It's
Yeah,
all
community
sorts
star
of
ratings
ways
is a
you
great
can.
one.
Yeah. So that's, short answer. Community star rating is probably the best one to find a general list of best games, according to the LaunchBox community.
I use that for curating sort of an inspiration playlist of, hey, these are the ones that it consistently shows. I think the only fully 5-star rated games in my collection is Chrono Trigger is at the top, and it keeps trying to tell me to play Chrono Trigger. Should I admit this, or will the mob come after me that I haven't actually played through Chrono Trigger yet? I played through a majority of it, but I haven't completed it, and I think that is consistently rated as 5 stars in the database, and understandably so. But yeah, community star ratings. There's of course the Game Discovery Center in Big Box as well for a little bit of inspiration as well. But
you know what? I forgive you. But just to go off on a tangent here, because I just said use star ratings for to kind of filter your games and sort your games, and you can use that just to give you guys an idea of what that actually means. What is star rating? What does that even mean in LaunchBox? Because on its surface, it's easy to follow. It's a star rating. It's just a rating of a game. But how does that work, and how does that work in LaunchBox? Can surprisingly get kind of in depth to really understand what the heck that means. And you can kind of see it when you just mouse over the star rating option here in the game's detail panel. Like there's all of a sudden 3 lines of stuff that just appears. One is like your own star rating, one is the community star rating, and the other one is total community star rating votes. And there are reasons why they all exist. And if I had to put it simply, because I feel like talking about star ratings could encompass like 30 minutes of our time, and we don't have that much time to talk about star ratings. But to put it mildly, LaunchBox cares about your star rating above all. So if you decide that Die Hard Arcade is a 5-star game, and you click 5-star like I just did, and yeah, it's a very good game. Maybe not 5 stars, but it's a very good game. But to you, it's 5 stars. Now, LaunchBox, for all of the different things that deal with star rating, will use your star rating in its place. For example, if you took a 1-star rating game, but you like it as a 5-star rating, and you create a playlist, and that playlist says, I want all games that are 4-star rating or above, it will include that 1-star rated game because you yourself think of it as a 5-star rating. So does that make sense up until this point?
Yeah, so it's not just what the community rates. It takes your ratings into consideration, and that's a really good point here because Focusbook says, of course, ratings aren't everything. It's the sort of janky, sort of lesser, sort of highly rated games that can be fun. And I personally quite like how in the Game Discovery Center we actually have lists for the worst of. And I've had some fun looking through those where it's, I can't remember how we do it, if it's worst of like certain years or like worst of different genres. But that can be quite fun to look through because, ratings not everything. It's just a nice way to
100%.
try and narrow down on some of those things. But as you said, we could talk about ratings for a long time.
Forever. The last point that I want to make, there's actually 5 points, but the last point that I want to make, at least in this stream, is that if you do click on a star rating, it is beneficial to do that because that, if you have the setting on, which I believe it's on by default, that will then get added to the pile of the community's ratings, and your rating will make a difference to other people's libraries. So definitely, if you have that time and add it to part of like what you do during the time that you spend in LaunchBox, is just go through games that you like, games that you don't like, rate them, because it's highly beneficial for the entire community. And it goes with rating them on in your build or rating them in the game's database itself. You can do both.
Absolutely. So moving on in our thread, the next question was around it's around different variations of games. So of course there is the standard release version, but there's so much more you can experience with certain games. There are sort of ROM hacks of traditional games. There are sort of homebrew versions, prototypes, or sort of unreleased versions of games that get dumped and preserved. Aftermarket games. There's revisions of different games, and we sort of posted, well, which ones do you like to track in your collection? For me personally, I think it very much depends on the game itself. I certainly don't need to have all of these for games that I don't care about, but certainly for my favorite games, if there's a cool little ROM hack, I'll definitely track that, and I'll track it with it. I like to categorize them as additional apps, so that you've got the base game and then you've got its sort of variations on top of that. A couple of aftermarket games can be fun sometimes, but for me personally, it very much, I would have to like the original game to sort of add those in. I mean, Brian, do you have any sort of ROM hacks or sort of variations in your collection there? Like, what's your opinion on that?
I would love to hear everyone's opinion on this in the chat. And if you don't know the question, hopefully you can read it off my screen. But basically, do you how do you organize your ROMs? Do you keep particularly important to me? Like, do you keep ROM hacks? Do you keep homebrew? Do you keep aftermarket games, which are games that came out after the lifespan of the platform itself? Do you keep multiple revisions? If you don't, and you do like a one game, one ROM thing, what of all of these things do you keep in that one game, one ROM? Do you keep prototypes that never came out? Do you keep betas and demos and all those type of things? Is that important to you? Do you keep multiple revisions of the same game, or do you keep one of the revision? And which of those revisions do you keep? The first one, or the last one, or one of the middle ones? That would be an interesting question. For me, I do tend to want to go to one game, one ROM. And I personally do not want to see things like betas, demos, and prototypes. I used to put in prototypes and had some fun messing around with that. And but overall, it doesn't quite provide value for me to have them in there. Games like unreleased or early development versions, same deal. I usually leave them out. If I'm going to have one game like I do, if I want to go that way, I will try to choose the latest version unless there was something very specific in one of those early versions. Like maybe the early version was the one that I had when I was growing up and I played that version too much. And if I find that I'm playing this new version and it's like acting differently, I might go back to that. It happens very rarely. So it's more theoretical.
And there's a good point there's a good point in the chat here, which is I think one of the factors that decides the curation, which we haven't talked about, is actually size. Because of course, I think for newer systems, I think we're a bit more stringent with our curation because when every game is a 6 gigabyte ISO file, you might be a little bit more stringent. But of course, if the entire Famicom disk system collection is a couple of megabytes, then it's easy to sort of just think, oh well, I'll just keep that. So it's a good point there, Focusborg, and of course it can certainly dictate. I think because at that point you're sort of taking up more space on disk with LaunchBox's media than the actual collection itself. So there's still merit to clean that up, but size can definitely have an impact when it comes to which games do I keep. And there's a great point here about, of course, English translations of Japanese games, which I personally use that a lot in my collection. I tend not to keep the original Japanese file. Part of me in my head thinks I should, because I'm like, maybe eventually, if I ever study Japanese, maybe it'll be good learning for me. But of course, just using the English one for now.
So here's a question that I think is a little bit missing from this question number 3, and that I would like to hear from you guys, which is essentially, I don't know if you guys downloaded a no intro set in the last year or so, but if you have, you'll notice that within them, they keep adding more and more to them, like every single year. And one thing that I noticed that they kept adding was like, if a game was released, like a popular game, let's say Super Mario Brothers was all of a sudden released in some sort of compilation pack that Nintendo created, like this year, somebody will like take that version of it and then put it in this set, and all of a sudden you'll have something. That's a bad example. It's really like Castlevania, because I think that's actually a real one. There was like some Castlevania compilation set, and someone took the ROM from it. I don't even know how different it is, and then just like added it to no intro. So all of a sudden you'll get like a new version of Castlevania 1, but in brackets it'll be like from the Castlevania collection from like, I don't know, some recent version. Do you guys like those versions? Because technically, if you think about it, that has now become the most recent version of that game. So is that the version that you keep if you had to choose one version? Or do you go, wait, that was like aftermarket, that was like way after the lifespan of the system. In my head, I don't consider that as the last version of that game that came out. I don't know, what do you guys think about that? I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, for me personally, unless there is a major difference in the game itself, there's no point, because if it's a sort of re-release, if the game itself is fundamentally the same, I personally don't care about having the latest and greatest of that version. It's only if there is a significant difference to the actual game itself, like if it was released with some new content, or if there was something fundamentally different about it. But otherwise, I'm quite happy to stick with I'm not really pruning my collection on a regular basis, making sure I've got the most up-to-date versions. And of course, for me personally, because I play a lot with retro achievements, I'm sticking with the version that works with retro achievements. So I'm not really hunting out newer versions. I'm getting the sentiment from the chat that that's kind of the general consensus is, it's picking one version, unless of course there's a regional difference. You start with the last one that's available, or the one that you have, and you sort of go from there, like maybe a prototype for some of your favorite games, maybe some ROM hacks. Because of course, as Focusbook said, if you went after every single ROM hack, your collection would just exponentially just explode. I'm getting the consensus that it's picking the games themselves and then sort of pruning them from there.
And maybe, Cage, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when you say last, if available, the last version, I assume you mean, because like in my mind I would mean the last version that came out during the lifespan of that system. So if there was like 4 revisions of this game while the system was out, you'd pick the last one, the one that potentially has the most fixes or whatever they did as that last version, and not like the last version being the one that came out last year that they threw into the sets that came in from some compilation or something like that.
And of course, we're talking about revisions of the same game. There's a good point here about, of course, if it's releases, if it's different ports or remastered versions from different generations, I think that's a good use case to sort of have those, because they can be different.
That is another question entirely, right? that we could have asked.
Yes. Well, let's move on from the sort of versions. And there's some really nice opinions here, and I think this one is a little bit more down to personal taste of which ones you keep. We have some other interesting topics, but let's close out this ROM thread here, which is it sounds like there's an interesting 50-50 split here, and I think it really does come down to personal preference of, we asked, do you consider yourself a curator or a completionist? And by that we mean, do you want to collect the sets of certain platforms, or do you tend to sort of curate games that you want to play? And it's nice that there's a split there, because obviously people do this for different reasons. Some people use LaunchBox as a sort of ease of use for actually quickly accessing the games that they want to play. Whereas there's some amazing builds out there that are purely for sort of curation. For preservation. There are some really, really nice examples there of virtual collections, and we're very proud that we can accommodate both of those use cases. Me personally, I'm certainly more on the curation side of things, but it's nice to see that there's such a split there. And what about you, Brian? Are you more of a sort of curator or a collector?
I think I'm more with Focusborg there, where, I mean, it's LaunchBox. You can have both. You can have the full collection, and in my case, when I say full collection, I mean just like the one game, one ROM, but like every game that came out, let's say, for a particular platform, for a region, in a particular region or something like that. Anyway, and then you can curate collections like with playlists and have very particular tastes, very particular types of games easily accessible whenever that you want inside of LaunchBox. So hey, why not have your cake and eat it too, is what I just said right now.
Yeah. So it's nice to see that there's a mix there. And then the final question we asked, which is, and I'm curious to hear, because I do this, but I don't know if everyone does, which is, of course, there are the games that are immediately available to play within LaunchBox, but you can create placeholders for anything. And we know that some folks do that with sort of games media, and I've seen people do it with sort of magazines. I personally create placeholders for consoles that can't be easily, emulated right now. So like PlayStation 5, for example, but because I like to track all of the games that I've actually purchased, I want to sort of see them in that collection. And of course, I can't do anything with them in LaunchBox. I can't actually play them. But I like to see that they're there. I sort of put them into various playlists and things like that. And that one also is a little bit of a sort of less of a 50-50, but it is probably 60-40 towards the just tracking what is immediately available. But what about you guys?
And Focusborg, I mean, you're talking about magazines and soundtracks. That's really cool. I would definitely collect certain things. I mean, you collect things for nostalgic purposes, but for the purpose of the actual question, I respect the people that want to use LaunchBox as, let's say, a manager tool for their physical collection, or tools for like a organizational tool for other types of games that you can't actually play in LaunchBox itself. I personally just do it on a if I can play it, it's in LaunchBox, and if I can't play it, it's not in LaunchBox. I think it's that simple for me.
Yeah, makes sense. Lovely. Well, if anyone hasn't seen this thread, you can access it from our community corner. I'm actually going to paste the link in the chat. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and feel free to fill out the poll and let us know. Like we said, the reason we have these discussions is obviously not because we personally find it interesting, but we are generally curious how people like to sort of manage these larger collections so that we can inform some of the direction with what we're building.
And I'm kind of curious for Focusborg, when you say that you collect magazines, do you mean that you create a magazine section and then you import basically all the magazines of a particular magazine into its own kind of platform? Or do you mean that you collect magazines and associate them with particular games if that game is in that magazine? So you go to a game, you right click it, you go to the additional documents section of that game, and you see, oh, this game was mentioned in Electronic Gaming Monthly or Nintendo Power or whatever, and then you can kind of click it and open it up and kind of look through it to see that that game in it. So I think those are two distinct ways that you can set up magazines inside of LaunchBox.
Yeah, so it's a platform.
Yeah, so you do the first way.
And that's a really cool way of doing it, because Yeah, you're treating it more as like each release of that magazine is kind of an entry for that platform,
Mm.
which makes total sense. But I also really love the use case you said there, about, and we've had some requests for this because there's so much cool sort of additional media that comes with games, whether it's articles in magazines. I think commercials is probably the most highly requested one. Is all those obscure commercials from a specific game. And of course, there's a lot of curation to happen under the hood to sort of build that database. I'm sure there's one out there already, but that would be really nice to sort of see. Well, this game appears in, in this article, or has this commercial associated with it, or we've even talked about, this game has these protagonists from this series, for example. And yeah, it's a nice way to sort of narrow things down.
Yeah, and focus board, you don't even know how you would do it. It would take a lot of work. You'd have to go through each magazine separately outside of LaunchBox, map out which games it mentions, then go into LaunchBox, find those games, right click it, edit the game, go to the additional app section, give it a name, like Electronic Monthly, and then point it to that file, and then I would just hit OK. It would be something like that.
Yeah,
I think that's it.
sounds like a lot of work for a dedicated curationist out there.
Hey, it's another way you can just play the game of LaunchBox, and a lot of people do that. And to me, that's something that I would do on like a Sunday if I had time. I would find the magazines that I loved growing up, and I would look through them, catalog all the games around them, quickly do a search inside of LaunchBox, and kind of add these to those games.
I love that. I would want to edit the launcher so it would open the magazine on the very page the game is mentioned.
You could probably figure out a way to do that too. Wouldn't put it past somebody. Although
I've seen a really interesting, was it a plugin or someone did something with their build where, because of course LaunchBox opens documents in just your computer's general PDF browser, but I can't remember what it was called. But someone got their documents to open in another application. I can't remember what it was called, but the idea is that it simulates a sort of magazine. You can kind of flip through pages, and it puts this sort of virtual background on it as well. It was really nice implementation, actually. So it wasn't just looking at a PDF. It's got that sort of interactive turning the page, and it was lovely. It was really nice.
Yeah, and focus board being OCD, you'd want it to open to the actual page where the game is in the magazine. And my technical side of my brain is like, that would be really cool. But my nostalgic side of my brain says, I kind of want to make it feel like, I see the game in that magazine, and I want to see it like I saw it on the shelf, which was closed. So I'd want to see that first page first and see what it looks like and read that first page. And maybe the game is listed on that first page, and then I can get an idea of how I would have envisioned this magazine when I was a kid if I was just looking at it, and how excited I would have been seeing it and seeing that game, which might have been a game that I really loved, on the shelf. And then I'd want to open up the magazine, and I would see the table of contents and where it was, and the pages and the advertisements. And that's, to me, what adding a magazine to LaunchBox, the benefit to me would be, is that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So we could talk about this all day, and I guess for anyone who's sort of stumbled across this stream, you might think, well, how can these guys spend so long talking about these very minute and specific details? But that's what we love to do. We know that LaunchBox sort of enables some of that creativity to dive into those really sort of obscure use cases, but we love it. But we are going to move on. Otherwise, we could talk about this all day. So just to sort of recap where we're at, we're just over an hour here. I think we've got a bit more time. We're going to go through a few more topics. And we also have a license giveaway that's coming up. But I'm popped 3, and it didn't format it very well, but I've popped 3 sort of items in the chat, and let us know if anyone feels strongly about them, because we've got some LaunchBox questions about box art, about shaders, or about music. So if anyone has any preferences or really feels strongly about any of those aspects, let us know, and we can jump into one of those.
I am pretty passionate about one of those items. All right, as much as I like all
Which
of
one
them.
is that?
So when you guys import your games, right, there is a distinct gap between having your boxes show up uniformly versus having those boxes show up the way that they were, on the shelf back in the 80s or 90s. I'll give you an example here if I'm gonna click this here, so you could see the Super Nintendo box is much smaller in the way that it shows up versus these 2 boxes, which are from digital storefronts, or this Sega Genesis box or whatever. So there is definitely a camp that's like, I don't care what the original box of Chrono Trigger looked like. I just want a Chrono Trigger inspired poster that I can put here that's all the same size to all of my other ones. And then there's what I feel like a much larger amount of people that are saying, hey, don't touch my Chrono Trigger box. I want that Chrono Trigger box to look exactly the way that it was when I had it as a kid, or this Zelda box, for example.
So
and I'm kind of curious what people think on that subject.
I have an interesting opinion on this, which is basically, why not both? Because the way I see it, I think this is what I would love, is it depends on the view that you're in. So if I'm browsing by platforms, for example, I would want to see the original box art as it is. However, if I'm in a sort of more curated view, maybe it's a playlist, or maybe it's a sort of, maybe I've created a playlist of sort of top-rated games, things I recently played. When I'm mixing a whole bunch of different consoles together, so in certain contexts, if it could default to a unified poster view, I think that would be really nice. So it's kind of, because technically you have the media type there. You can have a sort of unified poster for the game, and then you have the original box art. And then depending on where you're actually looking at that, it sort of shows up in different places. So for me personally, if I'm looking through the original consoles, I would want to see what that box art is. But then, of course, if it's more sort of throwing a whole bunch of games together, having a nice sort of poster view could be quite nice. And I think Steam, I've seen a lot of the workflows with like Steam ROM Manager and the posters that come from Steam Grid DB. I really like that workflow actually. Like when they import those games into Steam, having that unified poster in that interface, I think personally works really, really well. That interface is obviously built for the Steam sort of poster image size. And in that case, I think it works really nicely. But then, of course, it's nice to have that original box that you can refer to. And of course, yeah, so Fishbowl said, yeah, so both works. Both options are great, or options are great.
Are you okay with the trade-off of now needing to store twice as many images in your build to pull that off? So if you just put it into context. I mean, you personally have 2,500 games. So therefore, for that one image type, you now need 5,000 images. And to put it into context for you, Focusborg, 45,000 items. Are you okay with the trade-off of now needing 90,000 items just to show the front of the box, ignoring all the other image types that you need? So you're okay with being like, if I took your build right now and said, hey, you have I don't know, 50 gigs of space, and now, hey, I want to add 10 more gigs to your thing to pull off unified boxes. I do feel like it should be a choice, but the question then is, should it be a choice when you're downloading the items? Should it be a choice after a fact when choosing between? Should we force users? So should it be like, you're now in a new section. I now force you to not see the original box. I now force you to see this new uniform box that may or may not be good, that what you want to see. Or should there be a million options that you can like toggle and switch and set up for the user?
I feel like it lends itself nicely to when you have, because when you create playlist in LaunchBox, you have the option to override the sorting for that playlist. And to me, it feels like, well, if you had an option to choose, because we give you the option to choose what image group you display. So, but that carries across all of your views. So if you say, well, for my main view, I'm using this image group, I'm looking at sort of the original boxes, whereas in a playlist, for example, I can choose the image group. Then that could be a nice trade-off. But of course, for loads of playlists, do you want to choose the image type every single time? But yeah, I mean, I feel like that could be a nice way about it.
So here's another 2 more examples on this topic that are a little different than what we were talking about. Here I'm in Nintendo. Everybody knows that the Nintendo Entertainment System box looks like this, right? Then why the heck do I have one that looks odd? What is this, Arkanoid? Why does this box not look like the rest of the boxes? And the reason is because that box was giant and came with an actual controller in it. And so for people that want the original box art, they're like, no, I want the original box art. And if you remember the Arkanoid, but if you had it, you would want to see, like if you're in the I want original box art camp, then you would want to see this. And I guess if you were in the unified box art camp, you would want to, as quick as possible, to edit this game, delete this image, and download, like, I'm gonna guess there's some sort of box that looks like all the other ones that someone created. Yeah. There. And you'd be like, well, I never had that game, so let's just make it look like everything else.
Yeah. There's a good point here, which is that not all games have a unified box art. And of course, I think the fan art category does a good job in trying to fix that problem. And Steam Grid DB does a fantastic job of hosting a lot of those. But of course, not every single game will have a sort of fan version of that. So that can be a limiting factor as well.
I do feel like, personally,
it's nice to know that.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt there. I do feel that Steam Grid DB goes a little too far as it's almost like, those movie posters that get rid of all of the movie poster stuff and just leave the images of that movie poster.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like where it's just like credits. Yeah, all the credits, the title might be even gone. Like who knows? It's just like the post. They almost kind of go that far to me when they're dealing with, let's say, retro systems. Sometimes the image looks nothing like whatever the box art looks like, and so it could be a completely different look entirely. Anyway, last example here that I'll give you guys. PlayStation. Original PlayStation. For those that know, the first 115 games of the original PlayStation came out, and they were long boxes. They were giant, very long. And then, of course, PlayStation said, no, I don't want to see any of that. It's so much cheaper just to make a jewel case and sell that, and they switched to that. So are you in camp, I gotta have all the originals? You're gonna see all of those long boxes in your library. But if you're in camp, I want just like a unified. I just want like a unified look. Then you might be one that removes all of those long boxes and replaces them with the jewel case one. Some PlayStation games were re-released with a jewel case, so that's actually not a big deal. But I mean, that poses the question: which cover would you use in that case if you are in the original camp? Because now there's two originals. But in saying that, so like what would you do in this scenario?
I mean, jewel cases. Firstly, whoever thought jewel cases were a good idea, because I guarantee anyone who owns jewel cases has.
They
at
were
least
a
one
cheap
cracked one.
idea.
Or
That's
you've,
what they
like,
were.
sat on one by accident. I mean, I love the Dreamcast jewel cases, but man, literally every single one of my Dreamcast games has been cracked in some place, shape, or form. I never had a PlayStation, but yeah, Dreamcast was the console I had that used jewel cases, and man, those cases they suck. But yes,
I mean, there's a lot of
struggle.
questions. It's like, which one do you want to do? What do you want to give to get those choices? What do you want to how do you want to get to that point? And if you actually look in the Games Discovery Center, that is why we don't use the boxes.
Yes, of
Have
course,
you
'cause
noticed
it should
that?
be unified.
Yeah. So what we did was we created our own unified box, gave it a size, put the background or a screenshot or something, and then overlaid the clear logo, and boom, you've got your own little box.
Yeah. Well, I think what we're going to do is, because I know there were some votes there for shaders as a topic, so let's talk about that, and then I think we'll have time for one more topic. We'll talk about shaders. We're then going to do our license giveaway, and then we're going to close out with some more Halloween related topics. And we could, of course, have time for questions and things like that. But thank you everyone for sticking with us. We hope it's been interesting. As you can tell, we do think about these things in a lot of detail, maybe a little bit too much detail sometimes. But yes, we like to sort of make sure we're catering to some of those. Exactly. So the question of shaders, I guess it's not really a question per se, but it's more just a sort of what do you use? And I'll ask you first, Brian. So obviously the combination of shaders, and this is less of a LaunchBox thing, but more of within the emulator itself. Like, there are some strong opinions on this. People have sort of preferences, but for you personally, what are you doing when you're playing your games? Are you going for sort of fully naked, I guess, with the original game, or are you putting any combination of shaders on top of that? What's your preference?
I am definitely camp shaders, I would say, for the most part. And I would definitely put it on the platforms that require it. What I'm not is I don't obsess over them, if that makes sense. I know there's a camp that really nerds on shaders and getting them just right, and then maybe like per platform, maybe the Genesis had like a little bit more of this like blurriness and sheen than like the Super Nintendo. Like I'm fine with like a basic shader, you know what I mean? And I don't want it to impact performance of the game or impact how long it takes to load and that sort of thing. I'm not obsessed about it enough to really go that far. I love the idea and the concepts of the mega bezel shaders, but I personally would end up just falling back to some sort of lightweight shader, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's I'm actually the opposite. I'm team no shaders, and that's actually not a preference. It's more just I actually haven't had time to dive into it. I think it's something I'd love to do, is really sort of dig into some of the options there, and there are some really nice defaults. I saw a really great example, and did anyone ever have, for anyone who had a Game Boy, did you ever get one of those? Because of course there was no backlit screen, and a lot of my gaming memories with the Game Boy are sort of playing late at night, either on like car trips or like in a hotel or something. And you could get those these magnifying glasses.
Oh, I had one of those.
Strap onto the top of your Game Boy, and it had a little light on it as well. And of course, you're looking through this thing, and it just turns it into a complete mess. It's like looking through a fish tank at your Game Boy. And I've seen someone who did a shader that recreated that. It was like it had the magnifying glass with the sort of bad backlight on it. And I thought that was I love those use cases where it's like, the Game Boy's a great one, because it's like you could look at it in this, pristine, nice view, but why would you do that when you can look at it in like a vomit green? Yes, that's the one.
I completely had this one, I swear. I don't know, maybe it was like the Light Boy. They all look the same. But yeah, I completely had one, and it had like the light that shined onto the screen so you could play in the dark. Yeah, I played that all the time with that little like Light Boy thing.
Yeah.
So much. It was crazy. I would thought that you were going to say, okay, so with Game Boy in particular, right? Do you guys remember it being that like barf green color? And do you want to recreate that color inside of RetroArch? So like when you load up RetroArch, there is a shader specifically to recreate that?
Yeah.
Is that something that you guys use? Because there is a community of people that grew up with that like Game Boy Light. Was that what it was called? I might be
the Game Boy Pocket.
Game Boy.
Oh yeah, no, there was the light, wasn't there?
The Game Boy Light. Okay, here it is. Where it now no longer had a greenish like look that you remember. It had a backlight, and it was actually just like the color of whatever like what you would see if you loaded up Game Boy games in RetroArch right now. You would end up seeing just like that white background. And there's a lot of people that remember playing Game Boy like that. So yeah, I can say all I want. I grew up with the original Game Boy. I had the bulky one. I had like a Game Boy like carrying case, and it had like all my stuff in it. Like as like a little kid, I would carry around almost like a briefcase or something. It was so freaking big. And you'd like put your Game Boy in it, and you would clamp it down, and you would carry it around like a briefcase, and you're like going to work, and you'd open it up, and you'd like play your Super Mario Bros. Or whatever, Super Mario Land, and like that's what I remember. But then there's like all these other people that had the Game Boy whatever, Game Boy Pocket. There's all these other ones that came out. There's so many Game Boys, man, that came out. That I also had the Game Boy Color.
Pocket fans in this chat.
Also had the Game Boy Color. Wasn't there like a Game Boy? I'm thinking of the Game Boy Advance. I think was there like a flip Game Boy, original Game Boy?
Oh, the SP.
Or was that just for Game Boy Advance?
Speaking of,
for Advance.
Look what's right in front of me. Got mine right here.
Well, there you go.
So on a little stand on my.
Yeah, I only had the original Game Boy Advance, so I only remember that like original like wide screeny one. But I don't even know where I was going with this. I guess back to shaders.
Yeah, I mean there's choice with these things, and Game Boy is a great example because you don't even need to use shaders to replicate a lot. We're talking about a lot of the colorization of Game Boy.
But because I grew up that way, that's the first thing that I thought in my mind. Like I loaded up the Game Boy. I think a lot of people did as well, right? They loaded up RetroArch, and all of a sudden they're like, "Wait, where's the green?" I remember in my mind all these games were like slimy, puke-colored, green-colored. Where's that? And of course, you go and you find a shader that basically gives you exactly that, and then you set that for the Game Boy, And I would do that a lot, mostly for the handhelds, which is kind of, I guess that's where my line is. Like, oh well, these handhelds had very distinct looks. Let's recreate that. And so I would end up doing that, and fully aware that somebody else might not even think that the Game Boy had that color because they just grew up in a different era.
Speaking of adding sort of colors and things to Game Boy, how many Super Game Boy or Game Boy Player fans are in the house? Because that was a good way for me. And the thing with the Super Game Boy was obviously the added colorization that it added, but also the additional borders. Some games were sort of enhanced for that. And we actually have a really great tutorial on the LaunchBox YouTube channel about how to set up Super Game Boy within LaunchBox. If anyone has actually not done that, I actually highly recommend it, because you can actually launch games into the Super Game Boy, I guess, interface. And it basically replicates the bezels. It sort of comes with all of the original benefits that you would get. Highly recommend looking at that, because that's a really nice way to enjoy good old Game Boy games. You can't do it for the Game Boy Player. I believe you can't do that on the GameCube, but certainly for the SNES sort of Game Boy, Super Game Boy and Super Game Boy 2. And maybe Brian is actually bringing this up on screen right now. But you can actually launch into those interfaces, which is really nice.
So I did have a Super Game Boy growing up. I thought that was the coolest thing ever, to play it on the big screen. Yeah. I don't even, in my mind, I don't even remember doing a lot of it. I remember having it, loving that idea and the concept, and being able to take our, I didn't even have that many Game Boy games, to be honest. Maybe 5 or 6 or 7 Game Boy games as a kid. And you're inserting it into your Super Nintendo, and it's just there on the big screen. That was a big deal at the time. And so I do have that memory, and that's why I did at one point try to figure out how to set that whole thing up inside of LaunchBox, and we did, based off of that experience that I had. I wrote that Game Boy Super Game Boy video that's on our channel. So if you, I don't know, have you guys seen that Super Game Boy video? Maybe it's just within the mesh of all the other videos.
I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, but that's the way that I view the Super Game Boy, right? Because that's a debate all in itself. Do you view the Super Game Boy as a separate platform? I know a lot of people seem to view it that way. Or do you view it as just an extension of the Game Boy? Hey, I'm going to take my Game Boy cartridge, my Game Boy game, and now I'm inserting it into a Super Game Boy. And so I set it up like that.
The tutorial recommends that you set it up as an additional emulator, and then you can choose any of your existing games and launch with that emulator. So it treats it as the way it tells you to set it up is you have a different RetroArch instance that is configured for the Super Game Boy, and then you can choose. So normally you would launch just with normal RetroArch core, or you can launch with the Super Game Boy one.
Now you know where I stand on that, since I'm the one that wrote that video script.
Nice.
So that's the way that I would set it up, the way that it's presented in that video, because that's how I picture it in my head when I'm thinking about it, right? Sense. Yeah, it's not an extra game. It's not another platform. It's simply just another place I can bring my Game Boy games that I had and play it in a different way.
Absolutely. Alrighty, well, I think it's time to give away a license. What do you think?
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. So, if anyone has been on previous streams, so the way this works, there's a couple of ground rules. So this is for folks who don't have a license of LaunchBox, and if you have one for one of the platforms but you don't have it for the other one, then this is still fair game for you. So if you have a Windows one but you don't have the Android one, then feel free to enter. For those who have licenses for both platforms, we just kindly ask please not to sort of enter because we can't obviously give you anything new, but you're not going to be winning anything through that. So, but if you don't have a license for either platform, then feel free to enter. And the way that you enter is to just type a message in the chat. You have to, I've just popped it in the chat there. It's !LaunchBox. So for anyone who would like to enter, just pop that into the chat. We'll carry on for a little bit.
We're getting to the point where all you guys have everything. You have all the licenses that we have.
Yeah.
No, but I'm glad I'm seeing some people.
So, it's nice to see some regulars on the stream who are still entering, which means that you don't have the other one, which is nice.
Adult money.
This can be your... Okay, so we'll leave that running for a little bit. Just pop in !LaunchBox, and you could be the lucky winner of a lifetime license for Windows or Android. Whoever was saying they were looking to get a Retro Pocket 5, I can't remember the name, but yeah, maybe this is what you need. So we'll leave that running for a little bit. And I think we're coming to the end. We appreciate you guys sticking around. We hope it's been informative, but maybe interesting at the same time. I've certainly enjoyed this discussion. And I know that we can certainly dive fairly deep into some of these topics. But it's nice to see that a lot of you share that sentiment. So yeah, I know traditionally a lot of these streams, we try to sort of create useful content, whether it's tutorials or sort of helping folks, but sometimes it's nice just to take a step back and have a bit of a discussion, especially because it's Halloween. So thanks for sticking with us.
And now you guys kind of know what it sounds like to just be part of the LaunchBox team. This is what we live and breathe, is the fine details, so that you guys don't have to. Maybe that should be our slogan. We think of the details so you guys can just enjoy your games. You run the import, and we've taken care of all those little things. And for us to end up doing that, man, it's like a lot of diving into the weeds and having these discussions and just talking about it and just there you go, Mr. Nibble. Let us be pedantic so you can be pedanticer. Yeah, we really enjoy those conversations, and that's sort of what we do here, right? We figure that all out for you guys.
Yeah. So we'll give it a bit of time for folks to get their entries in. Don't forget !LaunchBox if you don't have a license. But while we wait for that, given the spirit that it's Halloween, of course, we hope you've all got some fun plans, whether it's gaming plans, family plans. I was curious, Brian. So talking of Halloween, I was wondering if you ever had a sort of experience from when you were younger, or even now. I mean, some of those games are pretty scary, but I was curious about any gaming memories that stand out as particularly sort of frightening. I mentioned earlier my one with Dracula's Secret, the point-and-click game with a sort of room that you enter with these big sort of yellow-red eyes that sort of popped on screen, and I was definitely traumatized by that for a little bit. But what about you? Do you have any sort of memories from some old scary games that stuck with you?
So I'll tell you this. When I was way too young, I might have been like 3 or 4, and I had snuck into my basement at the time, and this is where like my dad would watch TV, and so he was watching TV, and he was watching a movie. I'm trying to remember what it's called, but it had really like a group of scary clowns. I don't know if anybody remembers these like 80s, like those 80s scary. It's not the one that everybody thinks of. I'm trying to remember what it was. Killer Clowns. That sounds right.
Yeah, it's either going to be... If it's a group
Maybe
of
not
clowns,
that one. It was scarier,
Yeah.
and it wasn't it. It was
Yeah, it was
scarier
just a
than
single
that.
clown.
Yeah, it was super. Holy Christ, I don't remember what it was, but it haunted me up until now. Like I cannot do anything with clowns because of that. If that makes sense.
So this was a
yeah.
movie. This was a movie on.
And this
TV.
was a movie, and so anything, even anything to do with clowns in video games, all through my life, I cannot do.
Yes,
You'll
I'm
have to
totally in
find
the
it.
camp
Was
of no clowns. See, this is actually a more recent experience, which is I'm not going to lie, you would never catch me watching it. However, I was stuck on a plane with someone who was watching it right across the aisle from me, so it was in clear vision of where I was sitting, and I sort of indirectly ended up seeing some of the scenes from that movie. And
no.
not a huge fan, but that definitely, and that wasn't even that long ago.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I should look it up. I remember there was like a group of clowns, and it was definitely just like outdoors, and they were scaring people. But yeah. Normally, when it comes to clowns and games, I stay away. Yeah. And only because of like this one experience. It's crazy how those experiences shape you for like the rest of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone saying Krusty's Funhouse in the chat. I believe that was a game.
It was.
That was a great game.
Might have had different versions. And are you surprised? Not a fan. Actually, I don't have huge problems with that one, but yeah, I think that experience was me just being like, no, I kind of stay clear of that for whatever the reason is.
It's these tiny things, isn't it? I'll give you another example. Very funny, but does anyone remember the second Pokemon movie, which was Pokemon the Movie 2000? The VHS of that movie, you let the sort of credits roll, and as a kid you sort of put it on and you let the credits roll and you're sort of not really paying attention. And at the end of that movie, there was a trailer. I think it was for the next movie, or it was a trailer for something. But what happened is the credits would roll, so there'd be no sort of sound. And then suddenly there was this deep voice that was like, you thought this was over? And then it was supposed to be this like, it would kick into this trailer for this other movie. And as a kid, I was absolutely terrified of that because it just came out of nowhere. They started talking about like the next movie, but it was that old sort of like commercial sort of deep voice. And that absolutely terrified me because I wasn't expecting it. It just sort of came in out of nowhere. And I always used to sort of have to remember to stop that videotape before it got to that point.
That's so funny that were you ever like watching it and you're just like have your finger on the stop button? You're just like waiting.
I had a bit of time to let the credits roll, but yeah, I was like, oh, not watching that all the way through.
Yeah. Oh.
But, yeah, even in modern day life, I have heard of Scorn actually. Focusborg. Yeah, a recent game called Scorn. Haven't tried it myself personally, but yeah, and of course VHS on the CRT was a vibe in itself. The sort of staticness of it. If you're, you sort of let the tape run to the end, or you sort of turn off the game at the end of the night, and then you've just got the static on the TV.
Yeah,
can definitely be a little bit spooky.
Yeah,
but speaking of what is not spooky, of what is not spooky is a free LaunchBox license. So. Yes. For anyone who hasn't got in their entry, now's your last chance. You type in !LaunchBox into the chat, and you'll be in the running for either a Windows or an Android license. So I think we're going to go ahead and roll this. We've got a fairly small group here, so your chances are pretty good. But let me just go ahead and do this. So what will happen is once I hit the button, it will go ahead and announce the winner in our chat. So I see we've got one last minute entry. If anyone wants to get it in, you have 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And there we go. Did it, Pixel.
Right.
You have won the giveaway. Congratulations.
Congratulations. And I know I'm pretty sure you've been in previous streams trying to win that, so congrats that you got one. This is what you will have to do, and I guess what you'll have to do is send a message. We'll send a message to you on Twitch, so look out for that soon.
I'll do this now.
And what you'll have to do is send us, I believe, your name and email address, and and the type of license that you want, and we will hook you up.
Yeah, so let us know your name, email, and which platform you want.
Yeah. And while that is going on, yeah, I think we had a fun night of talking about everything spooky. So thanks for dropping by. Hopefully everybody has a safe Halloween, and that you can get some form of gaming done in the next few days over Halloween, and we'll be back next week with a stream. I can't remember what's on the schedule, but if you want to keep up with the schedule, you can go to our Twitch, and there should be a schedule there, and you might be able to follow that, or follow us there, follow us on socials, and you will have you'll know when we're going to stream next. We stream every week. We give a license out every single week, and we talk about all of this stuff every single week. If you have any questions, all things LaunchBox, we can geek out about LaunchBox. We can dive deep into stuff in LaunchBox. We can just talk about all things retro, nostalgia, LaunchBox, all the good stuff that we love to do together.
Absolutely. Well, it's been nice having a sort of discussion here today. Thank you everyone for joining. We are on X as well. Fishbot, I've just sent you the link, and Did It Pixel, we have got your message. We'll follow up with your license, so congratulations there. Yeah, we hope you are enjoying these streams. We're certainly trying to keep up the cadence and do them a bit more frequently. So yeah, let us know if you have any feedback or things that you'd like to share. Hope everyone has a wonderful Halloween. Who was it that just said, I just recognized the, sour gummy worms. Oh my goodness. See, now I might have to go and grab a bag of those.
That's all you need. You just need to see the words.
Amazing.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. And yeah, we'll see you guys later in the next one. Take care, everybody.
Happy Halloween.